Awesome. Awesome. So I'm going to bring back on everybody. We've got Bob, and I know we had several questions that came in that I want to make sure that we're going to be addressing. Earlier on in the show, you were kind of going through kind of that transaction, that deal. And one of the questions that Matt Smith said is, he said, what interest was she getting? And I want to make sure this is really clear, because there's really three numbers that are talked about. There's what the interest rate that the seller wrote the note at, right? The seller wrote a note at what? It was 0%, Bob?
No, 5%.
5%. Sorry, 5%. So that was 5% interest. That's the note, right? And then he secured the note and got a partial investor, and the partial investor was getting a fixed return on investment. And what number was that?
9%.
9% return on investment to be passive partial investor. And then there's the yield, which would be the rate of return that Bob's getting. And we don't need to go into that because we've already decided it's enough, right? It's very high. And that's so those are the three numbers there. There was another question too from Helen Taylor that said, could you review how you come to the amount owed to the investor, please? And so I thought, Eddie, if you would take a moment to talk about what an amortization schedule looks like and why that chart was looking like that.
Yeah, so Helen, what we did is we have built Excel tools to just take amortization schedules. So we took the note, the 5% note, and that was what you saw in the orange, and that was just an amortization schedule that Excel generated. And then we did a layover. So then we laid over the partial, which was in the blue. And that was the amortization of the investor's $70,000 investment at their 9% interest on their investment per year. And then obviously Bob, in an early payoff situation, gets the difference between the payoff to the partial investor and the payoff of the entire note. So we cover these. We really, as people progress in NoteSchool training, where we really have time to show these numbers a lot and change the numbers and show, well, what if this or what if that and stuff. And so people then find out fairly quickly that, they can get a sense of it. And we're just utilizing tools, financial tools. So.
And, I wanted to point out too that the investor, the partial investor, they did get everything. They did get their rate of return. They just got it early. Yes, they invested thinking it was going to be a 10-year payback, right? They were just going to get $8.95 a month, but they got all their money back. And what we found is that when they do that, they're just ready to turn around and invest again. And that's kind of the way that whole picture works as you go through. So.
This case study, one thing about yield, because I have discovered people will get drunk on yield, right? Bob sold this loan about 6 years ago. And at 6 years ago, 9% return was probably a good return.
Right.
The return in the marketplace for rental properties and other investments has continued to go down, right? So the return on that investment has declined. And today, Bob, I would guess that closer to about 6% if you sold a partial today is about where you would be.
I would agree. Yes, definitely.
So that becomes more relevant to the market conditions. So all great questions there. And once again, I will say this about yields and amortizations and stuff. Sometimes we're seeking kind of the punchline answer, and there's enough. You have to build a little bit of a story before that punchline answer makes sense like it does to you now, Bob. But the answer is you bought the whole pizza, you sold less than half of the pizza, and you didn't know it was going to pay off early, but it did, and all of a sudden it just made you didn't get as much money as you would have gotten had it paid out over time, but you got another lump sum of money of $100,000. Now your retirement account grew from 11.5 to $100,000, and now you could go do 10 partials.
And that's on one transaction, guys.
In fact, I did reinvest it.
Oh, we know you did, right?
You're not surprised.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those of you who are newer and you're trying to figure out why would someone take 6 or 7% if they could have 9%, you got to understand market conditions, like Eddie said. But the other thing is this, the thing you might have missed is the risk associated with the partial, right? This partial investor is truly passive. If anything was to go wrong, Bob is on the back side of this note. He doesn't get any of the payments until the partial investors is taken care of. And so he's going to mitigate that risk on their behalf and make sure this thing performs, because, you know, Bob wants to get paid, right? And he wants this thing to go smoothly. And so this is another reason that the yield starts to come down, is when you start taking more and more risk off the table, the rate comes down. And how do we know this? Because when you put money in a bank, do they pay you 5%? They don't, right? Because your risk is extremely low. So hopefully that kind of helps answer some of that stuff. There was something else that I wanted to talk about while we still got time, is it was really about tracking. Matt asked, if you're taking down the back half of the note, talking about Bob's part of the note, how do you track it, right? Or how do you track it if they stop performing? And you got to understand, in the note business, the thing about it is you want to outsource this portion, right? And this is what's called a third-party licensed and compliant note servicer. This is someone who's going to collect all the payments. They're going to make sure taxes and insurance are taken care of and all that kind of stuff. And they're going to make sure that when somebody wants to refinance their house, they're going to calculate the payoff, right, guys?
And just understand this, that so when Bob bought this loan, right, the loan, the investor, or the person that sold the house, they weren't a sophisticated investor, right? They were she was a lady that sold the house, and she did what she understood. When Bob bought this loan, obviously he boarded it with a servicer, right? The third party licensing compliant servicer. And then when the partial sold, the borrower still makes their loan to the servicer. The servicer then just redirects that payment for, the 120 months or until it pays off, right? So it's all very behind the scenes, and it's very, I hate to say the word easy, but it's very smooth, and there's not a lot of jerking around with that. So
yeah. I don't want to have to be involved with receiving payments, dispersing payments, the tax, the legal ramifications. I don't want to mess with that. That's too much brain damage. I don't want to. That's not what I do.
Yeah, absolutely. And Teresa's asking a question, Bob, that I'd like you to answer. She says, but the first position investor, and she's referring to the partial investor here, gets all of the money regardless of being paid off early, right? Like, you're not shortcutting or shortchanging your partial investors in any way, are you?
No, not at all. She received payments of $900, $895 a month for about 4.5 years, 5 years, whatever it was. And at that, looking at the amortization schedule, it had paid down so far, and then the remaining balance of roughly $50,000, she got that whole thing in addition to all the payments that she got up here.
Right.
So the question I have for you, Bob, is when she's gotten years of payments and now you give her a big check back, she's got all of her money and the interest. Does she say, thanks, let's never do this again? Or did she say, I like this, put it in another one?
She's still looking for that 9% return. And in today's market, when I tell her it's today's market is not 9%.
Yeah, but she's looking for that passive piece, though, right?
Absolutely.
Loved the fact that she didn't have to deal with the brain damage piece, and she was actually getting a paycheck every single week.
Oh,
every month. Right. It's mailbox money for her as well.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's what she was looking for. She had money in it, and I don't remember if her money was in a self-directed IRA as well. It wasn't performing the way that she wanted it to perform, and she was just looking at, and you met her at a little meetup, right? And that's the way you found this lady, and she said, you just explained a deal, and she said, oh, wow, that sounds great, Bob, here's what I have. Can we do business?
Yeah, I love that. And I think this is a good segue because there were several questions about learning different details or learning about paperwork. And I know Travis was asking about that. Travis, I'd encourage you to reach out to us. Go to noteschool.com, click that contact us page, and simply reach out. We'll try to point you in the right direction, either get you the resources you need or the education you need to use those resources. And I love what Micah says here, Brian. This only confirms that we need to sign up for NoteSchool today. and obviously, that's encouraging to hear. And
that's some avatar.
Yeah, I know, right? A little scary looking there, but it is one of those things of, hey, man, you get a little bit of this knowledge out of Eddie Speed's head, you get it into your head, and it's amazing how much you can transform your business, right? Yeah, absolutely. So as we kind of wrap up the show here for the day, I just want to say thanks. I know there's so many questions that are coming in, and we're going to go back to YouTube and Facebook, and we'll try to get those answered in a timely manner. But listen, I want to let you know I appreciate all of you for joining us here on NoteSchool TV. Thanks for sticking around in the after party, hanging out with us a little bit. Make sure you're clicking that bell notification so that you're getting notified before we go live, so you can jump on early, get your questions answered, and take that next step on your journey. Feel free to check out some of the links that we've showed you today, and we'll see you next Wednesday at 11:05 Central Time. We'll see y'all on the other side.